Have you ever saved up for something so long that the moment you finally had it in your hands, you were almost afraid to look at it directly? Have you ever sat down in a place you earned, a place you paid for, a place you had every right to be, and felt the entire room decide, before you opened your mouth, before you said your name, before you gave them a single fact about your life, that you didn't belong there? Have you ever held that feeling down, swallowed it whole, and told yourself, not today, not this one time. Today, I'm going to let myself have this without a fight? If you know that feeling, if it lives somewhere in your body the way it lives in so many of ours, I need you to stay with me. Because what happened to Dr. Amara Cole on a Tuesday afternoon at Gate 47 of Hartsfield-Jackson Atlanta International Airport is going to feel very close to home. And before this is over, I promise you it is also going to feel like something worth holding on to. She was 44 years old. She had a window seat. She had a boarding pass that said first class in letters she had already read 4 times, just to be sure. And she had a man 2 rows behind her who had already decided, without asking her name, without knowing one true thing about her life, that she was sitting in the wrong seat. In 9 minutes, a flight attendant would ask her to move. In 22 minutes, the captain himself would walk out of the cockpit. In 41 minutes, the most powerful person on that plane would turn out to be the woman nobody thought to ask about first. But right now, in this exact moment, Dr. Amara Cole is sitting very still in seat 3A, hands folded in her lap the way her mother taught her to sit in rooms that weren't ready for her yet. And she's telling herself the same thing she has been telling herself for 44 years. You are in this seat. You are not moving. Her name is Dr. Amara Cole. She is a neurologist. She has spent 16 years studying the human brain, the organ that holds everything we are, every memory, every love, every loss, every scar that never fully closes. She knows, with clinical precision, exactly what is happening inside her own chest right now as she sits in that seat and feels the room make its quiet, instant calculation about her. She knows what that feeling is called. She knows where it lives in the body. She knows it did not begin with her, that it was handed down through generations like a survival manual nobody wanted to need, passed from mother to daughter in quiet kitchens before school mornings, in whispered instructions before job interviews, in the particular way a black woman learns to hold herself in spaces that were not built with her in mind. She knows all of that, and she knows, the way anyone who has ever carried this knows, that understanding it does not make it hurt any less when it arrives again at 35,000 feet on a Tuesday afternoon when you're already tired in a way that sleep alone cannot fix. You need to know about the 14 months before this flight, because this is not a story about an airplane. This is a story about what it costs to keep going when everything underneath you disappears at once, and about what a person reaches for when grief has taken the one hand that always reached back. 14 months ago, Amara's husband died. His name was James. He was 47 years old. He taught high school history. He could make a room full of teenagers care about the Reconstruction era with nothing but chalk and conviction, which Amara always said was the closest thing to a superpower she had ever witnessed in person. He made his own coffee every morning at 5 a.m. because the quiet of the kitchen before the world woke up was his favorite part of the day. He held Amara's hand through every hospital shift that ran 3 hours longer than it was supposed to. Every night, she came home too depleted to speak. Every Saturday, she slept until noon because her body had finally stopped negotiating. He held her hand for 18 years, and he never once made her feel like the weight she carried was too heavy for them to share. He died of a heart attack on a Thursday morning in February, between the kitchen and the hallway, halfway through what should have been an ordinary day. He was there, and then he wasn't. That is the only way Amara has ever been able to describe it to anyone who asks. And she has stopped trying to find more eloquent words because some losses refuse to be made more bearable by language, and the attempt itself feels like a small betrayal. She nearly quit her practice afterward. She sat in her office on the first Monday. She returned and stared at the framed degree on the wall and could not remember, for a full 3 minutes, why she had wanted it so badly when she was 22 years old and studying until 3 a.m. in a library that smelled like old carpet and ambition. But then a patient came in, a woman her mother's age with a new Parkinson's diagnosis and so much terror in her eyes, she could barely hold Amara's gaze. And Amara sat with her for 40 minutes past the end of the scheduled appointment. Not because the insurance would cover it, not because it was on the calendar, but because she recognized that terror, the specific terror of watching something essential begin to leave, and she cannot walk away from it. She has not walked away from a patient since. She has, however, been diminished in other ways. Slowly, in increments small enough that on any individual day, you could almost convince yourself they don't add up to anything. She stopped taking vacations. She stopped letting herself sleep past 6. She stopped wanting things purely for herself, because wanting things for yourself requires a kind of permission that grief quietly revokes, and she has not found a way to get it back. This flight is the first thing she has allowed herself to want in 14 months. Her mother, Eloise, is 73 years old. She lives in New Orleans in the same house where Amara grew up, a shotgun house on Treme, with a lemon tree in the backyard that Eloise has been tending for 31 years. Eloise has been describing her hip lately as just a little stiff, and Amara, who is both a physician and a daughter, knows that just a little stiff is the specific phrase a proud 73-year-old woman uses when she is in considerably more pain than she wants her child to worry about. Amara has not seen her mother in 4 months, the longest they have ever gone. When she finally booked this ticket, she was sitting at her kitchen table at 11 o'clock at night, and she hovered over economy for a long moment, because economy was what she always chose, economy was practical, economy was the responsible decision. And then she thought of James, who would have said, with that particular gentle firmness that was entirely his own, "Amara, you are allowed to have a good seat." And she clicked first class, and she cried a little, and she went to bed. She read the boarding pass 4 times the next morning. She is not ashamed of that. At gate 47, she boards in the first group, the way the ticket says she can. She finds 3A, window seat. She puts her bag in the overhead, the good leather one her colleagues gave her when she made department head, and she sits down and looks out at the tarmac shimmering in October heat. And for the first time in 14 months, she allows herself to feel carefully and quietly like something good might still be possible. She orders sparkling water when the flight attendant comes through before boarding is complete. She holds a glass with both hands. This is, she will think later, the last fully peaceful moment of the next 2 hours. His name is Richard Halsey. He is 53 years old. He boards 12 minutes after Amara does, also in the first class group, because his company keeps him in first class as a matter of policy, the way it keeps him in certain hotels, at certain tables, in certain seats that his entire life has quietly, consistently confirmed are simply where people like him belong. He is the chief executive of Meridian Events Group, one of the largest corporate conference management companies in the southeastern United States. He manages, among other accounts, the annual Southeastern Neurological Medicine Symposium, a conference sponsored in part by this very airline, which is why his ticket is also in first class on this particular Tuesday. He sits down in 3C and he looks at Amara. And something happens in that half second that Richard Halsey will spend a very long time afterward trying to explain himself, without ever finding an explanation that sounds as innocent as he needs it to. He looks at Amara Cole, and he does not see a neurologist. He does not see a department head. He does not see the woman who is this year's keynote speaker at the very conference he is flying to finish organizing. He sees a black woman in a first-class seat, and something in him, built up over 53 years of moving through a world that reliably arranged itself to confirm every assumption he never had to examine, tells him quietly and with complete confidence that something here is out of order. He opens his laptop. He orders a drink. He reads 2 emails. And then he catches the eye of a flight attendant named Jenna and says, with the easy confidence of a man who has never once had to wonder if the room is on his side, "Excuse me, I think there might be a seating mix-up." He nods toward Amara. "I don't think she's supposed to be in this section." Jenna is 28 years old. She has 2 children, a 7-year-old and a 4-year-old. She has been a flight attendant for 4 years, and she needs this job the way people need a job when their mortgage is not a theoretical number. She looks where Richard Halsey is nodding, and she feels something move through her that she will later describe with considerable shame as a reflex she did not build consciously or maliciously, but absorbed over years without ever being given a reason to question it. She walks to Amara's row and says, in the carefully neutral voice of someone delivering bad news while pretending it isn't bad news, ma'am, "Can I see your boarding pass?" Amara looks up from the window. She knows. She knows instantly, the way black women develop a sense for the temperature of a room that functions as a survival skill, exactly what is happening and exactly why. She reaches into her jacket pocket and holds out the boarding pass. "Seat 3A, she says. "First class. You'll see it's all in order." Jenna takes it. She reads it. The boarding pass says exactly what Amara said it says. And here is the moment, the specific moment, where Jenna could make a different choice. She could say, "I'm so sorry to have disturbed you. Everything is absolutely fine. Enjoy your flight." But Richard Halsey is watching from 2 seats over with the patient certainty of a man who has never been wrong about a room, and the cabin has gone very quiet in the way that means everyone is listening while pretending not to. And Jenna makes the choice that fear makes for people who haven't yet found anything stronger to replace it with. "I'm going to need to double-check this with our gate system," she says. "Could you bear with me for just one moment?" Amara says nothing. She folds her hands in her lap. She looks out the window. The baggage cart is still making its slow loops on the tarmac below. She breathes. She counts the way her mother taught her to count when a room gets cold. Not as surrender, but as strategy, buying time for the body to stay ahead of the feeling that wants to take over. But inside, behind the composure that her mother and her grandmother and every woman before them learned to wear like a second skin, something small and fragile is being broken. Not her spirit. That is not what breaks in moments like this. What breaks is the thing she allowed herself to feel when she clicked first class at 11 o'clock at her kitchen table, the tiny, hard-won hope that this seat might just be a seat, that she might, this one Tuesday, be allowed to hold her glass of sparkling water with both hands and feel, without complication, like she belonged somewhere. That is what Richard Halsey took from her when he flagged down the flight attendant. He will never think of it that way. But that is exactly what happened. Jenna comes back. Behind her, with the measured authority of a man who has learned that measured authority is the most persuasive kind, comes Captain David Park. 19 years of commercial flying. Not a cruel man, a careful one, which on this particular afternoon is the same problem wearing a different face. He crouches slightly in the aisle and says, "Ma'am, I apologize for the disruption. We've had a report of a possible ticketing discrepancy in this row. I want to make sure we get everyone settled correctly before we push back. Would you mind showing me your original booking confirmation?" Amara turns from the window slowly. She looks at the captain. She looks at Jenna. She looks at Richard Halsey, who is studying his laptop with the focused attention of a man who has started a fire and would prefer not to be seen near the matches. She looks back at Captain Park, and when she speaks, her voice is the voice she uses in the hospital when a situation is escalating and she needs everyone in the room to understand that she is the calmest person present. "I have shown my boarding pass," she says. "It is valid. It has my name on it. The seat number is 3A. I am in seat 3A. Is there something else you need from me? Or may I simply continue my flight?" Captain Park holds her gaze. She can see he is a decent man in an indecent position. And she has lived long enough to know that decent men in indecent positions are the engine of most of the injustice in the world, because they're not the ones who start the fire. They're the ones who let it burn because putting it out would cost them more discomfort than they have decided to spend. "I understand," he says. And then, because he has made the calculation that the discomfort of one passenger is more manageable than the displeasure of the man in 3C, who he has incorrectly assessed as the more consequential person in this row, he says, "I'm going to ask you to please gather your belongings, and we'll get you sorted in another section while we verify." The cabin is absolutely still. 14 passengers in first class, every one of them hearing every word of this. Not one of them speaks. Not one of them says the simple, obvious, immediately true thing that would end this in 10 seconds. They look at their phones. They look at their drinks. They perform the specific practiced mime of people who have decided that whatever is happening in row 3 is not their problem, because involvement would cost them a measure of social discomfort they have not budgeted for on a Tuesday afternoon. Amara looks at them, one face at a time, the slow, careful pan of a woman who is memorizing something she already knew. Then she looks back at Captain Park. "I'm not moving from this seat," she says. "The ticket is valid. I'm a passenger in good standing on this flight. If you remove me, it will be formal, on the record, with documented cause, and I will be requesting a copy of that documentation before this aircraft leaves the gate." The words land in the silent cabin the way a stone lands in still water. Captain Park blinks. Jenna looks at the floor. Richard Halsey's fingers have stopped moving on his keyboard. And then, from seat 5A, 2 rows behind Amara, a voice. Low, steady, unhurried. It belongs to a woman who has been sitting there with a glass of water and a folder of documents since before Amara boarded. A woman who chose a seat near the back of first class because she has spent 30 years learning that the people who prefer not to be noticed until they choose to be noticed tend to see more clearly than the people performing in the front of every room. Her name is Dr. Patricia Osei. She is 61 years old. She is the Chief Medical Officer of the Southeastern Neurological Medicine Foundation, the organization that selects the keynote speaker for the annual symposium that Richard Halsey's company manages and this airline partially sponsors. She sets her folder on her tray table and says, clearly enough for the entire first-class cabin to hear without raising her voice at all, "Captain, before this proceeds any further, I think you should know that the woman you're asking to move is Dr. Amara Cole. She is this year's keynote speaker at the Southeastern Neurological Medicine Symposium, the conference your airline sponsors. The man who flagged her to your flight attendant is the coordinator for that same conference. So before you remove a woman from a seat she paid for and earned, I would think very carefully about what kind of story this becomes in approximately 45 minutes when we land and everyone reaches their phones." The silence in the cabin changes quality entirely. Captain Park goes very still. Jenna's face moves through 4 distinct expressions in the space of 2 seconds. Richard Halsey closes his laptop with a soft click that sounds, in that absolute quiet, louder than it has any right to. And across the aisle in seat 4B, a man named Stephen Cho, who is the airline's director of communications, on a positioning flight, who has been sitting there for 6 full minutes listening to every word of this while telling himself it is not his business, feels something cold and clarifying move through his chest. The specific sensation of watching yourself make the wrong choice in slow motion and understanding with sudden total clarity that you still have 60 seconds to make a different one. He stands up. "Captain," he says, "I'm Stephen Cho, Airline Communications." "Stand down. This passenger has a valid ticket." She stays. Captain Park looks at Stephen Cho. He looks at Dr. Osei. He looks at Amara. And in the arithmetic of a man who has just understood that the power in this cabin is not distributed the way he assumed, he makes the only remaining decision. "Ma'am," he says, "I sincerely apologize for the disruption. Please enjoy your flight." He goes back to the cockpit. He does not come out again until they land. Amara does not say thank you. Not because she is not grateful, not because the relief moving through her is not real, but because she is thinking about every woman who has ever sat in this exact seat without a Dr. Patricia Osei in row 5, without a Stephen Cho who finally stood up, without the boarding pass and the credentials and the institutional affiliations and the 16 years of published research that should have been entirely irrelevant in the first place, because none of it, not one piece of it, should be what determines whether a woman gets to sit in the seat she purchased on a Tuesday afternoon she needed to get somewhere. She is thinking about her mother, who once sat where she wanted on a bus in New Orleans in 1974 and dared the entire world to say a word. She is thinking about James, who would have been beside her in this row, who would have held her hand from the moment she sat down and made this feel like an adventure instead of a battlefield. She is thinking about what it costs, accumulated over a lifetime, to be asked repeatedly to prove yourself in rooms that other people walk in as simply as themselves. The plane pushes back from the gate 14 minutes late. Amara orders another sparkling water. She holds it with both hands. She looks out the window as Atlanta falls away beneath the clouds and the world gets quieter and smaller, and she allows herself to cry. Just barely, just enough, in the particular privacy of a window seat at altitude where no one can see your face. Because she is exhausted, because she is still grieving, because she only wanted one afternoon, one seat, one glass of water that was simply hers without requiring a negotiation. And even that required a fight that no one should ever have to fight alone. Richard Halsey sits in 3C for the remaining 2 hours without speaking. He does not look at Amara. He opens his laptop twice and closes it again without typing anything. He is a man who has always moved through the world with the unexamined assurance of someone who has never needed to audit his own assumptions. And for the first time in memory, those assumptions are sitting with uncommon weight on his chest. He does not yet know the full shape of what he has set in motion. He will learn it over the coming days, and the learning will be significant. When they land, Stephen Cho steps into the aisle and says to Amara, without preamble, "I should have stood up 6 minutes earlier. I am sorry." He does not try to explain himself beyond that, which is the correct instinct. Amara looks at him the way she looks at patients who are telling the truth about something difficult. She nods once. "Don't do it again," she says. He nods back. Dr. Patricia Osei catches her in the jetway. She takes Amara's hand in both of hers, the way Amara's mother takes her hand, and she says, "I have watched Richard Halsey walk into rooms and assume things for 11 years. I have had enough of both. What happened on that plane will be formally documented by me in my capacity as Foundation Chair, and I will be speaking to the airline's board and to Richard's executive committee before this week closes." Amara squeezes her hand. "How long did you know I was on this flight?" Dr. Osei smiles, small and exact. "Since you checked in," she says. "I always know when my keynote speaker is traveling to my conference. I want to see if anyone would do the right thing without me." She pauses. "I waited longer than I should have. I'm sorry for that too." The aftermath is not one single dramatic reversal. It is, like most real accountability, a sequence of smaller ones over days and weeks. Richard Halsey's company received a formal letter from the foundation within 72 hours. His response, a carefully constructed non-apology describing his concern as a matter of ticketing integrity, was forwarded to the airline's communications team by Stephen Cho, accompanied by Stephen's own full written account of the incident. The airline did not renew Meridian Events Group's conference partnership for the following year. Richard Halsey announced his retirement from the company 4 months later, citing a desire to pursue other opportunities, which is the language a man uses when the weight of what he built has finally been handed back to him. Jenna requested a meeting with her supervisor 2 days after the flight and asked to be part of developing new passenger interaction protocols. She cried in that meeting, not the managed tears of someone protecting their position, but the honest, unglamorous crying of a person who has seen something true about themselves and doesn't know yet how to be better, but has decided that not knowing is no longer a reason not to start. And Dr. Amara Cole stood at a podium 3 days later in front of 400 neurologists and researchers and physicians, and she gave a keynote address about the neuroscience of memory, about how the brain encodes experience, about why trauma leaves marks that achievement alone cannot erase, and about why that understanding is not an abstraction but a moral obligation for anyone who calls themselves a healer. She did not mention the flight. She did not say Richard Halsey's name. She did not need to. Every person in that room who had ever been asked to prove they belonged somewhere heard the whole of it underneath the science. And she was, by every account, extraordinary. Afterward, she called her mother from the hotel. "Mama, I'll be there by noon tomorrow. How's the hip?" "Just a little stiff, baby," Eloise said. Amara laughed, the kind of laugh that arrives without permission after a very long time away. She told her mother she loved her. She sat on a hotel bed in her conference clothes and felt, not healed, not past any of it, but steady. Like a woman who has set down something heavy and remembered, with some surprise, that her hands are still strong. "James would have been proud of you today," Dr. Osei had said in the elevator. "I know," Amara answered. "He usually was. Before I let you go, I want to ask you something real. Not the kind of closing question that disappears when the next video starts. Have you ever needed a room to simply let you in? Not as a credential, not as a title, not as proof of anything at all, just as a person in a seat they paid for on an afternoon they needed to get somewhere. Because I think most of us, somewhere in our lives, in one version of that question or another, know what it feels like when the room says not yet, or not here, or not you. And I think most of us know that the strength it takes to stay in that seat anyway, to not move, to hold your glass with both hands and look out the window and refuse to be made smaller, is not the loud kind of strength. It is the kind that was handed to you by women who sat where they wanted on buses and dared the whole world to respond. Amara Cole bought a first-class ticket. She sat in her seat. She did not move. The truth of who she was arrived eventually, the way it always does. But she should never have had to wait for it. None of them should. If this story found something real in you, share it with someone who needs to hear that the seat they earned is theirs. And if you have ever been the one who stayed quiet in a cabin while someone else needed you to stand up, maybe this is the week you start practicing something different. I'll see you in the next one.